Hello, everyone, and welcome to Really Old Movies. I'm your host, Harrison Skolin, and today I'll be discussing Gone with the Wind from 1939, starring Vivian Leigh, Clark Gable, and directed by Victor Fleming. And so, with that, let's get into my review here. All right. So, let's start out with talking about the plot. The plot, I gave it a 5 out of 5. I think it's amazing looking at just the different eras within this period in American history, from the antebellum South to the Civil War and then the Reconstruction era. All three are very distinct and very different eras within this movie. And to help us follow along, of course, we have the story here of Scarlett O'Hara, who loves Ashley Wilkes, and just all the different things that happen over this course of, I want to say it's almost 20 years, where she just can't get over and let him go. And it's because of her inability to let go of the past, her inability to move on from this man, that it leaves wake and destruction and death to several close people to her. And I absolutely love it. It's a beautiful story. It's a great one to follow along with. And now you'll hear people say it's, Confederate propaganda, the lost cause theory and whatnot. And even if that is the case, I personally don't believe that. But even if that were the case, I still think the story is really good. And I think anybody can enjoy it and connect with it. It's a very human story and makes you realize just how painful it is, but how important it is to move on from the past. And it's her inability to do so that affects all the people around her that truly care about her and truly love her. And I think it's a beautiful story. It's based off of a book. I have not read it, but I think it's very well executed. You borderline hate Scarlett O'Hara just because of how cruel she could be, how evil she could be. It's almost a villain's journey, really, if you think about it. But the best moments for her are the moments where, like when she comes back to Tara and she's holding the turnip right and she says, with God as my witness, I'll never hunger again. Like there's little moments like that that kind of give you hope that, oh, maybe she will change. Maybe she will move on and whatnot. But yeah, it's a fantastic movie. I love the plot. 5 out of 5. All right. Let's move on to the acting. Same thing. 5 out of 5. I think it's incredible. Clark Gable as Rhett Butler is amazing. He's my favorite character in the whole film. He's the only one that sees through her facade. He's the only one who sees her for who she really is, and he still loves her for it. And he himself is almost naive in that way too, because he thinks that, oh yeah, I could change her, I can make her better, and just time and time again, she proves him wrong. And she's the same way. She's very stubborn. She thinks that she could eventually convince Ashley to marry her instead of Melanie, and just all these horrible things going on around them. And Scarlett is so self-focused and so focused on that mission. I also love Hattie McDaniel as Mammy. I think she's a great character. Adds a lot to it and is very important for the character development of Scarlett O'Hara. She calls her out on her behavior and straight up tells her to her face how terrible she is. And she needed that, and yet she kept ignoring it. And then you got Olivia de Havilland as Melanie. She's the perfect angel, sees no wrong, even sees the good in Scarlett O'Hara. And whether she ignores the fact that Ashley might have a thing for Scarlett or not is very interesting. It just shows the purity that her character is and just the horrible things she goes through and just how willing she is to give people chances. So I love that about it. The only weak actor, in my opinion, but it doesn't bring it down any points. I still think the cast overall is 5 out of 5. But Leslie Howard as Ashley Wilkins, got 2 female names. No offense, Leslie Howard, rest in peace. But I actually thought he was a pretty plain character, in my opinion, and plain portrayal as that character. But maybe that is on purpose to kind of show how just ordinary he is, how Scarlett is putting him on this pedestal and making him bigger than he really is. It makes you wonder, does she really love him, or does she love the history that he was a big part of, the antebellum South, right, where they're all wearing the big dresses and all the big parties and whatnot? Is that what she's really holding on to? Not necessarily Ashley, because after the war, he's a totally different person. He doesn't have that lifestyle anymore. That their money's all gone. That whole house is gone. The was it Wilkes Manor, something like that? The 12 Manor. I can't remember the exact name, but it's all gone. He's a totally different person, and she even convinces him to stay and run a sawmill, even though he has no idea how to do that, versus going into banking, which he was more interested in. It just shows how selfish Scarlett really is and how much she wants things to stay the way they are, but they just can't. Change is inevitable. And, I related to that. I don't know about you guys, but I don't like change. I like things to stay the same way. But this movie shows that not only how naive that is, how childish that is, but how dangerous that can be. Yeah, so superb cast overall, 5 out of 5. All right, let's move on to the directing. Okay, so Victor Fleming, he did the directing here. He did a fantastic job. I thought he was great. He did this movie the same year as The Wizard of Oz. Absolutely crazy. Crazy, two huge productions. I think the old saying is that while he was on break from Wizard of Oz, he'd be working on this and vice versa. I think that's incredible. That everything was great. The staging, the camera work, the actors, all that. He did a fantastic job assembling it all together, making it work. Yeah, it's probably my favorite film of his. So I've seen a few of them, like Captain's Courageous, Wizard of Oz, Joan of Arc, A Guy Named Joe. He directs these great films that are very character focused and whatnot that I really, really love. So he does a fantastic job. 5 out of 5. All right, let's move on to the cinematography and special effects. Again, a 5 out of 5. I think the close-ups are incredible. I think the wide shots are incredible. Especially the scene where, Scarlett's holding the turnip, those scenes are fantastic. I love the coloring there. But I also just love the stage or the settings in general. They look so real, like that inside the houses and inside the different shops and whatnot. Just beautifully put together. The costumes are dazzling all around. It's a beautifully, beautifully shot film, beautifully put together. Yeah, it's incredible looking. I don't know how much of it was on location at all. I imagine most of it would have been shot in a studio and studio lot in MGM and maybe some outdoor, but it looked incredible nonetheless. He did an incredible job here, the cinematography, and just the scope of it. I mean, the wide angles like of Terra and just the beautiful coloring and beautiful matte paintings, but also the real areas they were at. It was just beautiful all around. I need to see this movie in 4K. I think it will look fantastic in 4K. The color correction alone is amazing. Because the version I saw is a Blu-ray version, and it still looks amazing. So I would love to see a theatrical or a 4K version, definitely. But yeah, 5 out of 5 for sure. All right, let's move on to the music. What can I say, man? 5 out of 5 again. I think Max Steiner knocks it out of the park. The music almost makes you want to cry, like hearing Tara's theme. It makes you kind of long for what was lost and the good old days and whatnot. Very nostalgic feeling, very hopeful, but also tragic. It's a beautiful score. It makes you want to cry. My favorite part is when, both times near the intermission and the end of the film where, she says, "As God is my witness, I'll never hunger again," or "Today's another day." That stuff where the music starts to swell up and build up. That's the best, in my opinion. It's amazing. It's a great score. I listen to it all the time. It's a great score. It's one of my favorites from a movie just ever. So yeah, 5 out of 5 for sure. All right. Now let's get to my overall score. So Uh, 5 out of 5. So that means it's 100%. This is one of the few movies that I give 100% to because I think it's a perfect film. Graphic language, very, very mild. A very famous line, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. That line is one time best line in the whole movie, in my opinion. But yeah, very tame. Violence wise, there's some bloody arms, shootouts, very brief though. And we see more so the after effects of the battle. We're in the middle of the Civil War for a good half of the film. Especially when she's in the hospitals and whatnot, Scarlett is. It's very tame by today's standards, but it doesn't. When you see the wide shot with the thousands of, it's probably hundreds of extras, but it just looks like thousands of soldiers, kind of puts in perspective the scale and the scope of the Civil War, especially when she's trying to find the doctor to help deliver the baby. He's like, "You kidding me? Look around you. I can't leave these people." So she ends up doing it herself. So it's violent, but it's not gory or anything like that. It's very tame in that sense. Okay, in regards to nudity, sexual content, there's some kissing in some scenes where women put on their dresses and whatnot, but it's very, very tame by today's standards. Okay, political bias, none, although it depends who you ask. I don't think there's any political bias personally. Okay, family friendly, I would say very much so. You may have to see it in several sittings with your kids. I don't know if a kid could handle a 4-hour movie. I just don't. I mean, to be fair, I had to split it up too. I couldn't watch it all in one sitting. 4 hours is a big commitment. But like Lord of the Rings and whatnot, I love it. I think it's perfectly fine the length it is. But yeah, just keep that in mind. Okay, entertainment value. I was very entertained. I love the drama. I love the war scenes. I love everything about it. It kept me engaged the whole time. And honestly, the 4 hours goes by pretty quick. It kept me on the edge of my seat for sure. I love it. And so with all of that, would I recommend this movie? Obviously, yes. This is one of the best movies ever made. It's one of my favorite movies ever made. The dialogue, the acting, camera work, story, all of it is fantastic. And what's crazy, so you could view Scarlett O'Hara as a villain because she does villainous things, right? But I view it as it's almost a warning, like, hey, we need to let go. Sometimes we have to let go of things, whatever that is, whether someone offended us or hurt us or whatever it is, you have to let it go. Otherwise, it'll lead to destruction and chaos around you. If you really think about it, right? She was able to drive Rhett Butler away, who was willing to see past all of her flaws, and she drove him away. And that tells you the kind of character she is, kind of how stubborn she was. It's a very interesting story, too. Because at some parts, you actually kind of like Scarlett, especially right after she says she'll make Tara, a better place again. She becomes hard and very, cold, but for good reason, so that they could fix the crops, so that they can, fix the land and whatnot. But she does push people too hard still. And it just shows just how deeply hurt she is and just how deeply insecure or whatever it is that's going on with her. I still think it's very relatable, and I think people need to watch this film. I hope that the subject matter of it being from the Southern perspective, and like I mentioned earlier, some say it's Confederate propaganda and, kind of lessens the horrors of slavery, which I don't disagree with. I definitely think it shows it in a more pleasant light. Like there's even a line where Ashley says, even we didn't treat the slaves that bad when they're hiring prisoners to run the sawmill. I don't know about that, but it's definitely a more sanitized version of this history, but it doesn't shy away from the brutality of the Civil War and just how horrible things were for it. Again, from a Southern perspective. Now you may argue, well, I would have been on the Union side. I would have, I wouldn't have dared be on the South. Would you though? Can you really honestly say that? I can't honestly say yes or no, because it's a circumstance. If you grew up in South Carolina, would you have joined in as a Confederate? Or if you're in Pennsylvania, would you have been in the Union? I think a lot of people, especially me, I have ancestors that were on both sides of the war. A scene in this movie that really sums it all up for me, though, is when she comes out, sees the scale of all the dead soldiers and whatnot. To me, in that moment, I was like, this is why war is horrible, why it's pointless. And I wish there was a way they could have resolved the slave issue without the Civil War, but maybe it was inevitable. History may have been different. But nonetheless, it happened at the end of the day. And same with this movie. It was made. It happened. It's got all these accolades. It's one of the best movies ever made. To this day, adjusted for inflation, it is the highest grossing film of all time. And, okay, another side tangent. I got mad when I saw a video, I want to say a year ago. I won't name names, but it rhymes with Dead Better Media. Red Letter Media. They were talking about how, the reason why this movie made so much money is because there was nothing else in theaters. And I totally reject that notion. Because if you're a fan of film history, you know 1939 was jam-packed with great films. You got this movie. You've got Wizard of Oz. You've got Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. There's a whole slew of films that came out in this year that many consider to be the best of all time. So I reject that notion. But anyway, I love this movie. I hope somebody at Warner, because Warner technically owns the rights to it. They own a lot of MGM movies from before, I want to say it's 65. I really hope they hold on to this movie and don't let it disappear. Because I think it's important to watch. I think it's a great story, great cast, great characters, and it's fundamentally important for film history because it changed everything in the industry forever afterward. It's also almost an end of the golden age of Hollywood because once the 40s came around, when we were in the midst of World War II, movies had to be made cheaper, and they weren't as big of a scale as this anymore. So in a way, as this is the end of the antebellum South, this is almost an end of the golden age, which is sad, right? But at the same time, very hopeful, like that tomorrow is another day and whatnot. So anyways, this is one of my favorite movies. I love talking about it. I always recommend it to people. And that's my overall thoughts. It's 100% one of the best movies ever made. All right, well, those are my thoughts on Gone with the Wind from 1939. That concludes today's movie review.